Hello again, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather, Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather, on this 31st day of October 2020. It went by pretty quick. Anyway, moving on to the first weather graphic, we've got warnings and watches out across the entire southeast coast. Starting up in the north, there's a blizzard warning out for Skagway, the Haines Highway, and the Klondike Highway, and that's from noon Sunday until 4 p.m. Monday. And during that time period, looking for anywhere from 18 to 33 inches of snow to fall in those areas, along with winds gusting to 55 miles an hour, and sounds like a blizzard to me. And again, that's for the period from noon Sunday to 4 p.m. Monday, and so quite a bunch of snow expected to fall up there. And on the southern southeast coast, the other red area there, that's a high wind warning, and that kicks into effect, let's see, Sunday night, or I'm sorry, actually kicks in tomorrow evening, late afternoon tomorrow, Sunday afternoon, late and through Sunday night. And that's for winds will kick up. Starting tomorrow afternoon, there'll be a gradual increase in the winds throughout the afternoon there for the southern panhandle, and looking at 30 to 40 mile an hour winds with gusts above 60 miles an hour in that area. And then in between there, the yellow area is a watch, and that's a flood watch. And that's out through Monday for anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of rain to fall. 4 to 8 inches of rain to fall across the area, and that will raise the potential for flooding anywhere actually across the entire panhandle. So quite an interesting couple of days coming up there, at least the next 24 to 36 hours. Up to the north, the winter storm warning continues for the Brooks Range there, and portions of the North Slope and southeastern Brooks Range, or the northeastern Brooks Range. Anyway, periods of heavy snow with 4 to 8 inches additional occurring from this point until Monday morning up there. Otherwise, that's it for the warning areas around the state. High pressure building in will eventually kill the winter storm warning I just spoke of up there, and should be generally dry and colder, actually, with colder air coming in. You can see upper level low, actually a couple of disturbances, one with the clouds there over the right along the Yukon River there, northwest of Fairbanks. The center appears to be, or actually near the Koyukuk Valley, and that's where the heaviest snow occurred in the last 12 hours, actually also in the last 24 hours. In the Koyukuk Valley, but it wasn't all that heavy. Today, Bettles picked up about an inch and a half at most there, and then by contrast, Fairbanks maybe had half an inch of snow, and most other locations had even less than that, anywhere from nothing to maybe a quarter of an inch at most. And winds came down the western Arctic coast from the strong gusts they had yesterday over 60 miles an hour at Cape Lewisburn. They're down to about 25 to 30 this afternoon. And still some light snow shower activity coming southwards. That Arctic air passing over the open waters of the Chukchi Sea, picking up enough moisture to, when it reaches land, drops this light snow. Now pushing southward through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, and but the precipitation all across the Bering Sea pretty light. And you can see the frontal boundary there right across the panhandle there with the colder air to the north. Really not all that much cold, really not much cold air is into the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area yet. Lower 30s this afternoon, some areas, but milder down to the south. And that's where the heavier rainfall occurred. Let's see, rainfall sit at about 1.15 inches in the last 12 hours today, while Hoonah had 1.95, nearly 2 inches of rain fell in the 12-hour period at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Otherwise, Yakutat had about 2/3 of an inch of rain there. And Metlakatla seeing about 3/4 of an inch in that area. And Juneau also had winds gusting to 45 miles an hour, one of the windier areas in the Panhandle today. Out west, low pressure in a front pushing rain and wind, gale force winds into the western Aleutians today. Otherwise, high pressure pretty much controlling the weather over the Bering Sea, central and eastern Bering Sea into the Russian Far East, but northerly flow around that, bringing down the surges of light snow into the western Arctic coast, North Slope areas, and then some of that slips on down through the Bering Strait. Some light snow shower activity along the Yukon Delta coast, and again some light snow in the central interior there, as I spoke of, Koyukuk Valley down into the central interior areas, and then that low pressure area pushing with the snow up in the Yukon, a mixture just north of the border, and all rain with the mild temperature southerly flow, southwest flow over the central and southern southeast coast, but clearing out Kodiak Island and colder. In fact, Arctic Village up there under the Arctic high, they had an afternoon reading of 9 degrees below zero today. And so staying below zero the entire day up there, and just barely above Fairbanks around 6 degrees in the central interior. And for tonight, looking at the forecast, we've got that low kind of slide southeastward there and stay south of the Aleutians, but close enough to keep periods of rain and gusty east winds in that area over the southwest Bering. Much drier and less wind as you get over toward the Fox Islands and the Alaska Peninsula. It stays mostly clear and breezy, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, as well as southern Alaska. Maybe some diminishing light snow showers up over the central interior, but that'll mostly bank up along the Alaska range, and those amounts won't be much at all. Get a little bit of a break over the Panhandle tonight with the low weakening there in the Yukon, and then the warm front starts to increase the rain late tonight over the southern southeast coast, and then later on the winds. But over the North Slope Arctic coast, again, periods of light snow, fog, again, amounts less than an inch, and the winds may kick up at times to 20 to 30 miles an hour as a series of those disturbances pass eastward on the north side of the ridge there. And out in the Aleutians, I mentioned, most action out there to the west. We'll see tomorrow that system continues to slide east-southeastward, south of the Aleutians, but the gradient between the 995 millibar low and the Arctic high over the Russian Far East keeps the gradient tight enough there for some pretty gusty east-northeast winds with periods of light rain and showers, maybe some fog. But that could possibly mix with a little bit of snow there for Alaska and possibly the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, but the amounts will be quite negligible if it does occur, and stays dry over Bristol Bay. Increasing gradient south central Alaska, so increasing northerly winds from what we saw today, becoming pretty brisk there over the Copper River Basin right down to the North Gulf Coast, with some pretty good outflow winds developing now with the colder air and the gravity flow into the Copper River Delta. Strong front, again, the high wind warning southern southeast coast, blizzard warning northern areas, and flood watches everywhere in between. And moving on to Monday, that system moves through, conditions improve over the Panhandle, and stays cold and dry over interior Alaska. Chance of snow north slope from the Brooks Range of the Arctic coast. Chance of snow farther south in the eastern Bering Sea, as you can see there, maybe reaching the eastern Aleutians. And looking at Aleutians tonight, 5 to 20 below eastern interior to 5 below to 20 above south central Alaska. In the 40s under mild southerly flow for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, mid-50s southern southeast coast, below zero Koyukuk Valley, Brooks Range, followed by lows 10 to 20 below eastern interior, and very mild over the southern southeast coast. But notice the northern areas there dropping into the mid-20s with the colder outflow winds and the snow. And then highs in the single numbers, central and eastern interior.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, not too bad really over much of the state. We got some IFR over the southern Panhandle, then up the eastern border there in around Juneau and a little beyond. But good VFR over the interior. You can see a spot of IFR there over the Yukon Flats. Marginal VFR along and north of the Brooks Range. But the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, mostly VFR, except for the far east side. Marginal VFR west side, through the Bering Strait, into the northern Bering Sea. Huge area VFR, though, for the central Bering Sea, Atka Island eastward, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and southern Alaska. And then some IFR with that system that's sort of off to the south, just still holding on to the western Aleutians to Amchitka. And that you can see kind of shifts a little bit to the east, and still close enough though to bring a chance of IFR mainly to Amchitka Island with marginal VFR to Atka. Otherwise, central southern Bering Sea, southeast Bering into Bristol Bay, all VFR, as well as much of Alaska. And for the let's see, the Panhandle looks like some IFR lifting northward now into the northern southeast coast, the southern 2/3 marginal. And for Monday morning, We've got some IFR reappearing there along and on the north, or the north slope of the Brooks Range, and which would be the southern north slope area there, but mostly in toward the mountains, and marginal VFR out to the Arctic coast, and then some areas of marginal VFR, northwest coast, Seward Peninsula, through the Strait into the northern Bering Sea. Looks like Pribilof Islands will be VFR, as well as the southern Bering Sea. All of the Aleutians forecast to be VFR Monday morning. Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. We have some marginal VFR now showing up mostly along the Alaska Range there and over the west central interior. But south of the mountains, it stays VFR all the way into the Gulf of Alaska, including Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, marginal VFR right off the east side there, just east of Chiniak and Marmot Bays, but IFR in across the Panhandle. As far as the afternoon goes, IFR clinging to the southern southeast coast and marginal VFR all the way up to Lincoln Island Glacier Bay. Yakutat VFR, Cape Yakataga, Cape St. Elias, though, marginal VFR, but basically southern Alaska VFR, including Kodiak Island, a little bit of marginal VFR possible on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, southern Bering Sea, Aleutians, Pribilof Islands, all VFR, marginal VFR, northern Bering Sea through the Strait, and IFR, southern north slope in the northern side of the Brooks Range. Passes tomorrow, that same sort of pattern, lowest conditions on the northern entrance, possibly IFR, VFR south side, and same trend for Adigan with call it marginal through the pass with the lowest conditions northern approach, better on the southern approach, and rainy VFR, windy VFR, possible marginal VFR north entrance, just a risk, slight chance, probably be VFR. Same pattern for Isabel as well, but I think it'll be pretty good. VFR through the pass, either approach. Mentasta definitely. Tonita VFR, good VFR for Portage, and Chilkoot and White though, still in the moisture, so IFR, both passes through tomorrow. And freezing levels, see the tight gradient there across the tight thermal gradient along the southeast coast associated with the jet that's actually a little to the south, and 2,000 feet down along the North Gulf Coast, Alaska Peninsula, and 2,000 feet along the Aleutians. Or that was at the surface along the North Gulf Coast. Anyway, icing a pretty good slug of moisture with another system coming up, considerable moderate in across all the Panhandle from south to north through the day, some isolated areas of moderate over the North Slope and Arctic coast, and then that band out west, staying south of the Aleutians the way it looks at this point in time. So as far as the remainder of the state goes, no real threat for icing at all until you get north of the Brooks Range. And for the jet stream, again, kind of bulging back northward from what it is today with the strongest winds aloft there at 33,000 feet, 145 knots southwesterlies. They're coming back to the north, upper level low over the interior, keeping it chilly, and northwest winds 75 knots out over the central Bering Sea. And 9,000 feet southwest flow there into the southern Panhandle, about 40 to 45 northerly flow, keeping it cool over the interior. 3,000 feet, we've got northwest up to 40 coming into the western Arctic coast, or that low up over the Arctic Ocean, otherwise high pressure from the Russian Far East across the Bering Sea and the interior. And easterlies 35 to 45 knots there over the Aleutians translates into moderate chop from Adak westward to Shimian Attu, below 4,000 to 6,000 feet. And mechanical turbulence of the same nature, moderate, southern Alaska and the central and southern southeast coast, pretty turbulent as well. Now be working from south to north through the day as that next storm and active front pulls northward.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Right. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire. The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain. This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know where the burn scars are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scar is going to be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through, because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So really important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a very active year. We've got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into the volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior. Here's another image. The same satellite pass as that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band. 0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny, but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful. Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue. That's glaciers and snow in the mountains. So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white. Icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown patches.
Look at that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time.
Wow.
And snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared. And the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016.
Okay.
We're just about to get into breakup. We've got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the
fascinating tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep, eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, continuing to increase there over the Beaufort Sea and from northeast to southwest. Still a narrow area of open water there, but a fair, off the central and coast there, and gradually thickening up slowly on the western Arctic coast on down toward Kotzebue Sound and in Norton Sound, but at a much slower rate. And coastal water forecast tomorrow, gale warnings as cold outflow winds kick in over the Lynn Canal area. North, 45 knots sustained, definitely storm force gusts will occur. And northeast 25, small craft advisories for Stevens Passage. And south, 40 knots for Clarence Strait and 13-foot seas. And south to southeast winds, 40 to 45 knots for the southern coast. And northeast 30 knots for the north coast, with seas 10 to 14 feet on the north coast and as high as 20 feet down to the south. And for Monday, northerly winds 40 knots sustained, especially early in the day for Lynn Canal, and then otherwise Stevens Passage, southwest 15, and small craft advisories for Clarence Strait, south winds 25 knots, and most of the coast, westerlies 25 knots for small craft advisories, seas running 15 to 20 feet, and then lighter easterly winds up toward Yakutat at around 20. Prince William Sound tomorrow, sustained northerly winds at 35 knots with 7-foot seas, gale warnings. And for the North Gulf Coast, north winds 30 knots, 6 to 8-foot seas, small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, and Cook Inlet. All winds out of the north, 30 knots, with seas 13 feet in Cook Inlet, believe it or not. And for Monday, even stronger winds for Cook Inlet north, 40 to 45 knots, with the strongest winds north of the Forelands, as we saw in the gradient tightening up. And northwest 40, so full gales, Kamishak Bay and the Barrens out of the northwest, and small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast, 25 to 30 knot winds out of the north, and Prince William Sound, north 30, seas 6 feet. Kodiak Island, north winds 30 knots, seas 9 to 11 feet for Sunday. And Sitkinak to Castle Cape, northeast at 30 with 8-foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, northeast 25. Bristol Bay, same thing, northeast winds 25 knots. And for Monday, for the Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, cold north winds 25 knots, 8-foot seas. North 25 for Bristol Bay with 6-foot seas. And a little bit stronger winds there at Kodiak Island, especially on the east side. Northwest 40, higher gusts out of the bays. Seas at 11 feet. Shelikof Strait, northwest 30 with 9-foot seas. Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, will go northeast 25 to 30 knots, 8 to 9 foot seas. Umac Island east at 30, sustained with seas give or take around 10 feet. And then 30 to 35 knot winds, edging into the gales there for the AKwx area. And then gales on out to Amchitka from the east at 35. And then small craft advisories for Kiska to Shemya for east winds at 30 knots. And moving on to the next day, Monday, Fox Islands northeast 25 to 30 knots, 8 to 11 foot seas. And 25 to 30 knot winds also for the central Aleutians. And then winds gradually dropping off, say from Kiska to Shemya, be down under small craft advisory levels for the winds, but seas will still be 10 feet. And for Norton Sound and the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, north winds at 10 knots. Otherwise, southwest coast, northeast 15 to 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the Pribilofs, east at 25. And then for Monday, north 25 along the Kuskokwim Delta coast, and northerlies at 20 for the Pribilofs, northwest 20 for the Yukon Delta coast, and northwest 15 for the St. Lawrence Island zone. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west-southwest 20 to 25 knots, and for the central and west side, northwest at 20, Cape Beaufort to Wales, northwest 15, seas running 4 to 5 feet. Outlook for Monday, only 10 knot winds from the northwest from Wales to Cape Thompson. Cape Thompson all the way up the west side there, west at 15. So not too bad wind-wise there for the Arctic coast through Monday. Central coast northwest at 15, west 15 on the east side. For tonight, again, winds will kind of kick up a little bit as surges of moisture with some light snow pass from along the Arctic coast and the north slope, cutting off along the Brooks Range. South, though, cold, high pressure, diminishing snow showers. Breezy and cold for southern Alaska, and increasing wind and rain. You can see big storm slides northward just off the coast. Perfect setup for strong winds, and there is a high wind warning out for the southern panhandle for gusts over 60 miles an hour later tomorrow and tomorrow night. Blizzard warning for the northern areas, Klondike Highway, Haines, Skagway for a bunch of snow and winds to 55 miles an hour. And windier and colder southern Alaska, less wind and cold over the interior, and still kind of snowy on the north slope and Arctic coast through Monday. But again, temperatures falling well below zero, central, eastern, interior, maybe down to 25 below in the clear areas.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.